Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to what many assume to be a long-forgotten season or series. This is Hyrule Castle, although it very much doesn't look like it at the moment. But anyway, welcome on into the building a minifigure scale Hyrule Castle scale model in Lego series that has no conjunction intro at all, and we are over what some of you may remember a very long time ago to be the little tiny pond that sits above the lockup, which of course you can see below here. Now, if there's any of these that you want to take a closer look at or go back to, of course the full playlist will be linked somewhere, and if not, it can be found on my channel. But today we're going to be facing a new room, and that is over here. And we're going to get into the design of that room in just a second. You can see it's all built up, not to mention we've got a couple of other files to look at, but I just wanted to come back to this corridor just to reorient you guys. I know it's been a while. So, hidden off this sheer drop over here, this would of course be the entrance to the lockup. You can see the passageway along the cells, and you've got the Hinox room over the top here. Now, remembering that there's this big gate here where there'd be a treasure chest, and normally you can't get through, you break through the back of a cell and come down this lovely, what we're calling guard corridor. Now when you turn the corner, of course, here you have the entrance to the west passage, which would be off this way on another plate. However, today we're looking at what happens in this 45-degree angle here, which was a big nuisance, and into this room. Now, we built a lot of what you're going to see today on a live stream, so while it may be a bit familiar, there'll be other parts of today's video that won't be, so please do stick around. But anyway, the big thing that shows up in this portion of the castle is this angled wall, and I wanted to get this right, so we've tried to hide the gaps as best as possible, using curved slopes and so on. And we've got this really nice archway design that's been accented. Now, there's a lot of light grey in here, and I think it's a little bit overwhelming, so we tried to get spots of colour in, such as the blue pendants on the soldiers' gear, and then also like this carved stone archway that is present here and not anywhere else. Now, perhaps this should also be dark bluish grey too, to make it a little bit stronger. But when you come through this archway, of course, you enter into a new room, and this is a room that doesn't really officially have a name. It is known largely as the water pump room. It's the room directly under Zelda's tower, which sits here, and there's a big air vent that sends you up about 3 floors. It's one of the lesser known rooms in the castle. And it's actually quite interesting, which is why I wanted to build it, because I thought it would be an exciting challenge. So the first portion of this room is this sort of almost boring undercover passage section, and let me tell you, again, I don't know if this was done in game this way to help the game designers, but I can sure tell you that it helped in making a model. Because the pond sits directly above this, I was really worried about the height of this room and the pond transecting this giant upwards room. However, this area of the room is only 1 story tall. It's only about this tall where you can see this brick going off, and then the actual wall starts here. Now, obviously, there is going to be a problem with the pond, and I've got to decide how I want to approach that challenge, which is why I've stopped here for today, and we'll be continuing with that next week or the week after, whenever I come back to this room to attempt to fix this. But yeah, I'm aware that that's still not great, and obviously I want this portion of the room to, well, look perfect practically. The other big thing missing is, of course, the like sort of almost semicircle that is the base of Zelda's tower. Again, just working out which semicircle technique I actually want to use on that. Now, I've begun decorating it. The purpose of this water room is sort of unclear. We could assume that it was the water for the whole castle. Maybe it powers the toilets, or maybe it is for clean water for kitchens and showers, which of course there are no bathrooms in Hyrule Castle that we know of. But you've got a little sconce on the wall, which has a really lovely technique. Using different arm pieces to actually create like this A-frame technique with the torch out the front. We've probably covered that before in this series. And of course you've got some barrels stuck to the wall on the side, maybe for storage of water, maybe for other things. Like over here we've got some bottles, again maybe water, maybe something a little stronger. A spear in a crate, just trying to represent these random crates that you of course see in the game, because remember our castle is pre-calamity. And then of course you've got the wooden scaffolding which will support, he says in quotation marks, the base of Zelda's tower. Now, the other interesting detail here is that water flows underneath the floor of this room, obviously dropping down from the giant waterfall over on this side. There's lots of black grates to represent sort of the grating that you stand on and which the water flows under, and I think I've done a decent job at making sure that you can actually see the water from directly above. I mean, it looks the right colour in comparison, and while it was very tricky to make sure there were no gaps, we got there eventually. Used a couple of different techniques. You can watch my frustration with that on the live stream. And then over here, this brown one is actually the air gust that you use to paraglide up to the little secret room that's over on this side. But also, the air grate actually looks different. It is made of wood, so I wanted to use a different patterned fence piece here, which is just fence pieces on the side. Lots of snot work in this floor across all these grills. and then just the normal tiling technique that we're used to in the prison. Now, actually, that does get quite complicated on the side. As you can see here, we've got some sideways builds, and all these blue plates are the ones you can see from above to make this room. But it's a strong start, obviously a long way to go, and by far not the main focus of what we're going to look at today. So I suggest we jump over to one of the most infamous plates in this series that has taken by far the longest to complete, where I think we might try and get it fully done today. But without further ado, let's go and visit our good old favourite A1, otherwise known as the only wall segment we've completed. And here is A1. Now, we did a little bit of this on stream, but we're not quite finished. So this plate sits outside the docks, and obviously it is largely, and well, predominantly the focus is, of course, this castle wall. We've got this little guy outside who we'll take a look at in just a minute, but I want to point out that there is one other part we're going to do on this today, and that is raise up the wall and fill in the belt on green here. I've had this white pillar here for weeks and weeks and weeks, and I've had enough. I want to build this dark bluish rock work all the way up to the top, so I have an idea of what it's actually going to look like in its finished form, so I can mark out next sections and so on. So I want to actually get this plate finished. We've had the texturing done for a while now, and you guys suggested a couple of details. So before we build that wall, I'll show you this little guardian that we've got in the floor, or in the dirt here. Now, as this is a pre-calamity, he is obviously not a deactivated guardian, which is why the colours are going to look a little bit different, and why I didn't make him an active one, and why I didn't make him in black. He is an excavated one, so he is still in the process of being dug up. They found him, they've uncovered him, and they're sort of yanking him out. So he's got all of these tree roots stuck into him using the olive green and the brown pieces, which contrast nicely against the bright green grass. You've got this dark bluish grey shape, which I was concerned about. I did try a couple of different colours on a stream, and then you've got all this dirt settled around and all these different slopes like he has been dug up, and two of his legs are poking out in the air. Now, he's a little on the big scale wise, and well, I think that's okay because it's more in scale with a minifigure, and as I said, this model does have varying scale. He also had a couple more leaves and so on to the rest of this model. I'm much more happy with how the front looks now. I was a little bit dubious of this guy or adding him in the first place, but I think it's good to add some variety, and otherwise this would be a very empty green space. I think we'll be using Guardians sparingly throughout the model, however we will definitely be using them. Now, there was one more addition that you guys wanted me to make, and I will add that before I finish building today, and that is a chest on the inside here. Hyrule Castle is going to have a lot of chests, and I'll talk about those a little bit more in a minute. Well, doesn't that just make a difference? So this is the majority of the rock work. It's not quite all of it, because I'm aware there's some tweaks that need to be made to this side because of obviously how it's going to connect to the plates on this end in such. But more specifically on this end, because there's some ledges that I've literally about 10 minutes ago realised I'm missing behind this wall where you can actually stand. So I'm going to have to knock out maybe about a third of this top section of slope work in order to redo it, but we'll do that when I actually have a wider idea of what this whole castle segment and everything neighbouring is actually going to look like. So another thing to notice, of course, is it is just a normal rock work technique, and as expected with this segment in particular, you've got the actual rock coming out of the top of the cliff. I've left this a little bit lower because obviously there is a platform up here as well when I remembered about this one, and we're going to have to work out where that goes, so I've left it a little bit lower, and actually next week we're going to work on the plate above the cave entrance. I really want to not be able to see the inside of the cave anymore, so that's sort of where I'm spending my time. Now, you have seen that I've also coloured this green. This was, of course, pink before. However, I've changed that. I just have green grass. I'm not going to be putting flowers and such back here because, well, as I may remind you, this is on the back side of Hyrule Castle, so the viewing angle, well, when it's actually done, will be something like this. And even if you did walk around the back, you'd have to be looking extremely, like, down over the top of this massive model to be able to see that there are no flowers in there. So I really do feel confident in leaving that as it is. There is, of course, that other detail that I did mention, and you can see in here, you've got a chest. Now, I believe there is one here in the game. In fact, I went on the Zelda dungeon map to have a look and see what it contained, see if I could be accurate. Now that brings me to an extra point, because as we go through this series, we're going to have a lot of chests, and a lot of these chests are not going to be filled with the realistic Zelda item. So let me drag this out for now, and you can see that in here we have the new 2 long bar elements with the ring in the middle, and these are supposed to represent the fire arrows that are found in this chest. Now, obviously, I know they don't look great. They're not perfect by any means, and we're using a new flat chest in there because it looks more like the wooden chests from Breath of the Wild. But those are at least supposed to give a little hint as to what might be found in there the best we can with Lego. Maybe a flame would have been better. But to be honest, my hope is that that new projectile arrow piece found with the Avatar bow that fires in the Mako submarine set, that will be recolored in red whenever we get Zelda sets or in some other line, and then I'll be able to put those in there. But that, of course, remains to be seen in the future, and we will just see how things go with that. But that is A1 almost done. At this point, I am basically going to call it done, because beyond a couple of modifications to make it fit better with other plates, and maybe a couple of lumps of rock here that you could stand on, it's done. It's actually up to full height. This is the first of the off the ground plates, because obviously there's plates all beneath this, where it's actually complete to its full height. So I'm really excited to go this way with this and just see how things go, and obviously to put it all together in a file would be lovely as well. We've got one more file to take a look at today, but before we do, coming back to those chests, I mentioned that a lot of these chests, or we'll be adding a lot of chests and storage that won't have been seen in the game or won't have any items specifically attached to it. So as we go through this series, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be launching a little competition to help fill those chests, and a couple other details around the castle. So stay tuned for that. That's coming very, very shortly. But in the meantime, let's take a look at one last file. This is a bit of a flashback. This brings us into the dock section. You can see the flame blade down here, and obviously the docks would be missing in the foreground. But I brought you back over here just because I found two mistakes. When I'm tinkering with test files and shoving things together and trying to make sure that everything works, you see all of the little shortcomings of the previous modules that you've already completed. And I thought it was interesting to bring these ones up because they have completely slipped past me up until now. And that was these white plates that I've added here onto these three of the plates in the dock. Now, previously these plates were plates instead of tiles, and obviously that would lead to everything above them sticking, and I was like, well, that is just gonna immediately like destroy half of these walls. You can imagine regularly lifting off the castle segment that we just looked at just now from consistent plate. It's going to drag pieces with it, and that is just already going to be a nightmare to try and line up and sort out and work from. So I spotted it, luckily. So it's all tiles now. Obviously, when it comes to building the model in real life, there'll be a couple of strategic points chosen to be plates, or some other locking mechanism. Maybe it's Technic lift arms going over top, or something. Something will be chosen when we actually know what the structure is going to look like, or maybe it won't be on these edges. It will be in the filler brick that will be up behind here in the real model as well. But for now, it's just easier just to say, let's tile them off, let's forget about it. And it would make a big difference, because tiling something off, it's a lot easier to remove one tile to add a stud than it is to remove an entire row of studs. So just a small optimization here. But over in this file, I also have another mistake, which was a bit of an oopsie. I had claimed a couple of weeks ago that this plate, which is EXT3, so one of the ones again that sits just underneath the big castle wall segment we took a look at, yeah, I just missed an entire segment of wall that sat on top of this small ledge here, and it wasn't up to full height, and I was like, oh yeah, this is complete. And when it came to doing the wall pieces on the piece that sits above it, it was just like a sudden realization of, oh, this is not finished. I claimed it was finished and it's not. So just added a little bit of rock work there to finish off. But that's actually going to do it for today's castle update. First one in a while. I've got another one pretty much ready to go. However, we've got custom sets and other stuff to talk about in between, so maybe a couple of weeks. Let me know how you're feeling about the castle. If you're confused whether I should be implementing some sort of map system to show you where I'm actually building, because I'm starting to get confused myself. There's a lot of plates and most of them just look like these solid rock work walls. So I think there should be some sort of system. However, it's nice to be back with the castle. So let me know what you think down below in the comments, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.